Manchester United are unbeaten in 4, sitting 6th and within 2 points of Champions League football. Now say what you will about Ruben Amorim or anything else, but a Fergie-like performance in an 8-goal thriller on Monday evening offered some optimism ahead of a challenging December schedule. We are touching on all of that, your questions and much more on the latest episode of The Theatre of Red. Why, hello, my friends. I hope you're all doing wonderfully on this utterly miserable December day. You know, I actually like the rain. Some people look at me like I have two heads at times when I say that. But it rained on each of the 3 mornings that my children were born. So I can only assume that there's some connection there in that. But I like the rain. What I don't love is the ridiculous winds and storms that call a halt to everything in rural Ireland. Now, for those of you unaware, I am a city boy, born and bred. Not Manchester City now, but just a city boy. But my wife and I uprooted and brought our family to a rural area of the country several years ago. We did so, obviously, to settle down. That is where I live now, and where my office and my recording materials are all based. And last week, on Tuesday morning, we got hit with yet another lashing of a storm that ended up causing such significant damage to a coupling cabinet in the region that the broadband was shut off and remained off for 6 bloody days, people. I've come to learn 2 predominant things since we moved here. The first being just how badly rural Ireland is ignored and neglected in this country, and the second being just how poor mobile coverage is out here. I suppose this is a long way of apologising for the lack of a podcast last week, but as I'm sure I have expertly painted exquisitely for you, there was absolutely nothing that I could do. It's a shame, really, because I could have landed here all smug after a promising 4-1 victory against Wolves, but that was another thing that they have taken from me. However, we are positioned pretty well in 6th place at the time of speaking. It's only 2 points outside Champions League football after what is a rather manic 4-all draw against Bournemouth. And it was one that kind of typifies the nature of this side with the helter-skelter. I think it is crucial to note that this was about as close to some of the champagne football that we were regularly treated to under the watchful eye of Sir Alex. Particularly in the first half, that first 45, it was spectacular. Even the most dug in of social antagonizers, I think, would struggle to argue that what we saw in the final third, everything from relentless pressing to beautiful transitions and expertly manufactured chance creation, it was simply breathtaking at times. When you look at it, the combinations between Mason Mount, Matthias Cunha, Bryan Mbeumo and Ahmad, they were absolutely excellent and they were a joy to watch. And even though the side went into the break at 2-1, I think you couldn't help but feel that it was another day where the game should have been finished before the restart. That came from 17 first-half shots that forced 2 key saves from Petrovic on top of the 2 that we scored, and several squandered opportunities. And for me, that is one of the most telling of situations from the game. It's a feature that we played out multiple times this season already. That said, it was a first-half performance that inspired some bit of hope, particularly in me, even without claiming 3 points. Now, it does go without saying that all was not perfect, however. As I wrote in my post-match notes, the defensive frailties of this side were once again laid bare, leading to widespread social cries that our unbeaten record when leading at halftime at Old Trafford was going to be done and dusted. That's a staggering record, obviously, back to 1984. It's madness, really, absolute madness to think in modern day, especially with how competitive the league is, that that's there. But much like we have seen against Forest, and for the 5th time this season, this side surrendered a lead, and that is frustrating. They actually surrendered a lead 3 times in one game this time. But it is the manner at which it occurred directly after such a promising first half that really stung. You know, so often we see the backline or a combination of a midfield body working with them being the architects of their own downfall. that offers further frustration being the common word that I'm using here. But there are variables that we do need to consider. Aidan Heaven is 19 years of age. Lenny Oro is 20. In the definition of defenders who often hit their prime toward the latter part of their 20s and sometimes in their early 30s, both of these boys are babies in footballing terms. If you can't realise that mistakes are going to be made there within that duo, then maybe football isn't your game. I'm not saying that being smart, but I just don't know what else to say. You look at it from the larger perspective, and the absence of senior figures like Matthias de Ligt, Harry Maguire, and the man who was unfortunately unavailable for the game, Nazir Mazraoui. I mean, it's telling. You just have to look at it. It's very telling. But we must remember that this squad finished 15th because of a lack of goals first, and then the issues behind them started playing their part. Ineos addressed the goal scoring first during the summer window. And what have we seen from that? We have seen an immediate improvement. The side is second only to City in goals scored this season, and always knocking about the top of the chance creation metrics since the opening day in August against Arsenal. Obviously, that was a game we lost, but that was yet another game where a lack of clinical finishing proved to be the costly issue. But like any other team, Manchester United need defensive stability, and the return of Lisandro Martinez is certainly going to be a great place to start. You only need to look at Arsenal, as I've just mentioned, and what was a formidable run of clean sheets before injuries to Gabriel and then Saliba. Now that's led to 5 conceded and 5 points dropped in as many fixtures. That is telling, and contrary to what people will have you believe, you need that defensive assurity there. Now, Sebastian Chalet is a listener. He got in touch late on Monday evening, and he asked, how do you feel about the current position of this squad and the board's feelings towards Amrim? Do you think that the side is underachieving and failing to capitalise on points dropped elsewhere, or is this what you expect? Well, how do I start without actually attempting to beat my own drum? The position, I think, is more or less what I had expected this season. And I say that having published my pre-season expectations with The Observer, stating that I expected a 5th place finish this season, even though that was jumping 10 on the previous campaign, with the obvious acknowledgement of the necessity for further windows to bolster the squad and to remove any unnecessary pieces that are currently there. But as I've always stated, I think as a fan base, we need realistic expectations for this team. And we also need public figures of power to stop shifting the goalposts following a brace of wins on any given day. You look at it, and I think Champions League football would be a dream, not because we're equipped to compete with the likes of PSG and co just yet, but the financial incentives offer massive advantages towards strengthening the team much quicker than we can do without European football. That said, the Europa League, that would also help massively. And I think that is a competition that we would not only enter with a viable chance of competing, but it also offers a pathway into the Champions League alongside the welcome boost of finances that you get from there. So when I factor all of that and the information that I receive on the ground, I think the board acknowledge all of this. And despite what some would have you think online, they're nowhere near pulling the trigger on Amrim's time at the club. There is a genuine understanding that he's still very early into this rebuild, and he's around where Ineos need the team to be right now, in around those Champions League places, or even the European places. A win against Villa can lift the side into the top 4 as well, and I think a lot of people, they're ignoring that, whereas I think any logical supporter would have taken that before a ball was kicked, given everything that's been and gone. When I look at the question there back, and you look at the last part of your question, I don't think that they are underachieving at this stage. It's frustrating, yes, to see the side fail to capitalise on points lost. But we have to remember the Premier League is the most fickle competition in club game, and it's stacked from teams top to bottom. Even Wolves, who can fire an upset into the works on any given day. And all you need to do is to ask the Arsenal fan base about that, just how lucky they were. I hope that answers your question in full, Sebastian. And if not, by all means, let me know. And obviously, thank you for taking the time to get in touch. And another listener that I have in front of me who did get in touch goes by the name of Mark Codd. They contacted us about the apparent formation change during the Bournemouth game and asked for my opinion on what we saw and what we can hope to see moving forward. Well, firstly, I hope all is good with you, sir. Thanks very much for taking the time to get in touch with us. This particular topic is something that I have been speaking and writing about since Amram's arrival in Manchester. Now, any regular listener will be aware of my thoughts on this, but I do think that Ahmad summed it up pretty well after the game in saying much of the setup depends on the team that they were facing. And he also highlighted that this United side plays everything and has played everything from a 4-4-2 to a 4-3-3 or a 3-4-3, while also pointing out that people on the outside don't see what they are doing, while confirming what Amram has already stated about the system not being as important as others in the media regularly point out. And one thing that I have regularly stated is that many of these ex-players turned apparent experts, or even some journalists, I think they fixate on the personnel on the field. They look at the team sheet, they look at the names, and then they dig too deep about structure and setup to be able to then take a step backwards and realize that maybe they were wrong. And if you're following what's been happening after Bournemouth, you've seen an awful lot of that following the final whistle. There's an awful lot of focus on the likes of Lenny Yoro's positioning. Now, at this point, just let me say, because I always draw back to this in my mind, we published a really in-depth piece many months ago on the Theatre of Red website, which dissected Amram's philosophy at Sporting and how so much of what he does will stem from his build-up phases. If you're not aware, I worked with Sporting while he was at the club, and I spoke with the tactical department on several occasions. Now, his team may build up in a 3-4-3 or a 3-5-2. But as soon as the ball is transitioned into an advanced area, players begin to rotate, and often what you see is the best ball-playing central defender progressing into the midfield. That in itself can look like a two-back, or even four at the back. But again, this is all depending on opposition and just how well the build-up phase is actually working. I'm not going to bore you with all of this right now because I could talk about this for quite some time. But that article is available for free as well. You don't have to pay for it. On the Theatre of Red website. It was published over a year ago, maybe 12, 13, 14 months ago. What I'll do is I'll find it, I'll pop a link in the bio for this episode. You read it, it'll take a few minutes, you will enjoy it, and it will shine a light on Amram's ideals, and you will see plenty of what these experts are speaking about today, as if they've all uncovered a great secret, when in reality, this is what the Portuguese fans were seeing with Sporting on a weekly basis. And personally, I believe that what we saw on Monday is that we saw the fruits of so much time spent with players and coaching staff. Because what you're seeing now is that the group knows what the manager wants, that the movements within the squad and the transitions, they're becoming clearer. I don't think that there's been any great give-in from the manager because of supporters' desires or from the words of the ever-enlightened Jamie Carragher. But there is a deeper understanding between everybody on the training field. And that is why the words of Ahmad are so important, because so many on the outside, they're completely oblivious to what is happening here. We witnessed the closest thing that I have seen in a very long time to a Manchester United performance of old. And although there is work to be done, you, me, and everybody else, it's imperative that we recognise some green shoots, people. With Christmas around the corner, each and every one of us is going to experience that annual pain of trying to buy for that one person who has it all. Well, what if I told you that I can help you out a little? The brains behind Has, Does, Whatever are creating one-of-a-kind Manchester United gear. Everything from t-shirts to sweatshirts, hoodies and Christmas jumpers made by hand in Manchester by a bona fide red. What began as drawing United players on an iPad has transformed into something absolutely marvellous. You can get 20% off your first order by simply visiting the website and signing up. Or you can avail of a splendid buy two, get one free offer that is running today. There has never been a better time to grab some unique Manchester United gear for you or that special someone. So visit hasdoeswhatever.com today to explore a huge range. I'll drop all the information in the show's bio, and you, listener, you can thank me later. Now, we spent a bit of time together today and haven't really been discussing anything negative by and large. It feels a little alien, doesn't it? This is Manchester United we're speaking about. Amongst everything that occurred on Monday, including a promising 30-minute cameo from Kobbie Mainoo, which I do believe gave Old Trafford a much-needed boost at the time, we then got handed a situation that was reminiscent to me of Garnacho and his brother, with the sight of a free Kobbie Mainoo t-shirt worn by the player's half-brother, and all of the unnecessary situations that something like that generates. And Ciara Clark emailed through to editor@theatre-of-red.com and simply asked, "What do you make of that idiot on Monday evening, Shaun?" Now, obviously, I think it was ill-advised and lacking any form of common sense from this one-time Love Island supremo. I will say that I have two younger brothers. They both listen, and I appreciate the mandatory expectations to support them wherever you can. It's almost a birthright, and I did so on many occasions, and I got myself in trouble plenty. But what we saw at Old Trafford was wrong. It creates unnecessary talking points, and it makes a potentially positive tone between the player and the manager. Like, Mainoo, as I said, had a promising cameo, and he was also presented with Casemiro's suspension, opening the door for a potential rare start in Birmingham. I mean, what is there to be gained from going so public with something that reeks of "look at me" on the grandest footballing stage in the country? I really do not like it. I think it typifies so much of what is wrong with modern day tactics from individuals. And it's like a real time spilling over from social media nonsense, to be honest. I don't like it. I think it's counterproductive for his brother, who he's supposed to care about. And I truly hope this is something that can be abolished fairly quickly behind the scenes. But Ciara then also asked for our take on Amram's public comments about the youth players, referencing Harry Amos and Cheeto, and the potential harm that Amram's comments will cause. Now, I don't agree with what Amram said, Ciara. That's the easiest way I can put it. On one hand, I can appreciate the sentiment of defending himself against what must feel like the daily pain in the arse of repetition about why he's not sending every academy talent onto the field. From my side, I think it would infuriate me to be dealing with the same question every single day, because we must remember, he sees these players routinely, and he is tasked with getting results at the football club, while obviously keeping an eye on academy. We can question the lack of wins, but the team is well positioned to achieve this season's goals, and nobody can disregard that. However, on the other hand, the comments that he said, whether right or wrong, publicly, you have to say that they're bad for morale. On top of that, they can obviously affect the potential cost of selling one of those players if it came down that in the future, as well as providing a pretty unsavory image for potential signings. It could discourage potential talent from joining the football club. I'd like to think that surely he walked away from that press conference and regretted some, if not all, of what he said in the heat of the moment, because he'll know better than most, and the track record that he had at Sporting in terms of bringing players from the academy, that the goal is to encourage youth. And you want to encourage youth to achieve its potential and then to ultimately grow into first-team players. If they're not going to grow into first-team players, then you're developing players that can be sold on for a profit, which ultimately benefits the first-team squad because you have money in the background to be able to invest in players. Overall, I feel that this situation was kind of counterproductive, very similar to Mainoo's brother and his t-shirt. And it's during the age of social media, so you get yourself in a situation where you can offer this and return anything resembling a public stoning. I mean, youngsters are impressionable. I know I have one. And let alone the prima donnas in the first team squad, these youngsters often require an arm around their shoulder. It's just the nature of growing up. And there are ways and means to go about these things. Personally, I think that he's made an error there, unfortunately. And you see with the ramifications of both players posting on social media afterwards only to delete that, it causes friction. It's unnecessary. I think it's a notch against Amram at this stage, one that I hope they can recover from. And another man who has generated plenty of conversation after the game is Bruno Fernandes. And that obviously comes following revelations about his comments during a November interview through the Portuguese Football Federation. Now, I'd be surprised if every one of you is not aware of his comments, but to paraphrase, he stated that he felt the club wanted him to go during the summer, but didn't have the conviction to make it happen. Now, he said that he stayed because he genuinely likes the club and the manager, and also for family reasons, but that he is hurt because he gives his all every single day while he watches other around him not doing the same. Now, as I said to several friends and colleagues, like I do at everything, I've attempted to look at this from different angles. And it's easy to see why he's frustrated. Say what you will about the man and his suitability as a captain, as Roy Keane normally does, but Bruno has given his best years to the club. He's failed to collect the honours that his output merits, and he has endured the inconsistencies and the scrutiny that comes with that, while so much carnage has happened behind the scenes. Realistically, from what I know, he could have left several times, and he didn't, and he feels like all of this should be recognised by the club, and that is understandable. I think it's crucial to acknowledge that he's also very similar to Ruben in that he wears his heart on his sleeve, and that can often get the better of him when speaking to the media. That in itself is something that needs to be taken into consideration because any player, let alone the captain of Manchester United, has to realise the ramifications of their actions, even if they are being sideswiped by the federation. But then from the club side, officials were presented with an opportunity to cash in on a player in his 30s with one of the most significant fees that they would ever receive. As I said this morning, I'd love to have been a fly on the wall for the defining conversation, but I assume it played out in a manner that recognised the importance of the player and a willingness to build around him for the future regardless of his age. But then it also highlighted the obvious upside in a sale in nothing more than a pragmatic business sense, because that's kind of the way that these Ineos officials work. It's business, it's not personal, and it can often lack the human touch that Bruno clearly has. But revisionism is always alive and kicking on social media, and 99% of the online fan base wanted United to sell him last summer. And despite what some would have you think today, that is also a factor which plays on Bruno's mind. Like, I would not be surprised if Bruno left this summer. And I hate to say it, it irks me to say it. But I would be profoundly upset that he didn't accomplish everything that he deserves at the club. Because right now I am discussing what I believe is one of the finest players to ever do it at Old Trafford. And I would encourage every one of you to continue enjoying him while we can. I can't stress that enough. So, where do we finish up today then? But the side of a rather interesting trip to face Aston Villa. Now, Amarin's side has endured one loss in the previous 10 since the turn of October, as I've alluded to. And on the other side, since losing to Liverpool at the beginning of November, Villa have won 9 consecutive fixtures in all competitions. You can't take away from that. 9 consecutive wins is hugely impressive. It reads pretty well for any football fan. That said, a lot of people don't actually watch Villa play outside of their own fan base, and they have been very fortunate not to lose in so many of their recent fixtures, especially against West Ham at the weekend, it goes without saying. But they are an impressive side, no doubt about that. And with players like Morgan Rogers performing as he is, there's always a chance. But they are overperforming their metrics and doing a lot better than the underlying figures suggest. And there's only so long that can last. In many ways, it's the opposite side of United's spectrum with a lack of clinical finishing and how that's affecting games. Funnily enough, despite all of this, a United win would lift them to within 4 points of a side who are currently in third in talks of a title contention, and that cannot be disregarded. Also, I do believe that history often matters in games like this, and United have got a good record against Villa. They've won 6 and drawn 2 of the last 10. And they've only one loss at Villa Park, which obviously it occurred 3 years ago. Now, we've seen in recent trips to Anfield and Selhurst Park that this team can travel to difficult grounds and get the job done, especially when people don't expect it. Admittedly, we will see the first lineup without our AFCON stars, and the lack of Ahmad and Mbeumo on the right wing will make for interesting selections. But I can't help but feel that we will get the job done. And I'm going to say we do it by 3-1. Now, I'm basing all of that on recent history, on Villa's tendency to capitulate against Manchester United, and the fact that we are unbeaten away from Manchester since the turn of October. You can call me deluded, I don't mind, plenty of people do, but I think we have more to see from some of the would-be fringe players in this squad. And on that, I shall leave you, say goodbye to you all for another week. Again, my apologies for the lack of chat last week, but as I have stated, the elements did indeed force my hand. I'd ask you all to be sure and check out the website and all of our socials. We're active on them every single day. And to also like and subscribe wherever you're listening today. Every one of you that have helped the show to grow in 2025 are genuine superstars in my eyes. So thank you, each and every one of you. And until next week, do stay safe, enjoy the time with your families, and let's look forward to a good showing in Birmingham. Up the Reds.